Oh, by the way, if it's a fire, go that way.
I was going to quickly slip in a slide saying, like, psychology is just the fundamental thing of design, but I didn't have time. I could have done it now, but it would have helped me. So hello, UX Brian. Hello, all the people down there. I feel like they're like a lord or something. Hey, here we go. Yeah, it's nice to be here in this old church, and it's strange actually because today is actually my birthday. And I was like. You have a drink. Is that the customer? I left my beer. Speech! I'll give you a 20-minute speech. Okay, cool. Yeah, so basically the irony is, it's my birthday, but we're in a room that has an exhibition going on right back there. It's my birthday, and the exhibition is all about death and dying, so I'm going to be quick. So I might die. It just made me think very mortal things. There we go. That shook you up, didn't it? Right, okay, so... I'm going to talk a little bit about cognitive biases in 25 minutes. I'm going to see how much I can get through. Quickly go through what they are. So yeah, cognitive biases, they're little quirks. These little quirks that make us human. They're basically these irrational tendencies that we have that are very natural to us, but they make us almost imperfect. Let's move on. They're drawn from three different areas, really. Behavioural economics, my background is in economics, I'm a designer, I don't know what happened. Social psychology, which I'm really interested in, and cognitive science. A number of different areas come together, make these, the concept of cognitive biases. I wanted to just give a quick warning. This is an ethics-free zone. We live in a liberal city. I'm a liberal guy. Some of the things we're going to talk about here are slightly unethical, but it's okay because it's in the context of research, so it's fine. There's some more so than others. So given that, let's explore the irrationality of human thinking. Hey, cool. Let's move on. Let's talk about, I'm just going to go straight into these, and just because I've got lots to get through. I'm going to start with the bias called the goal gradient effect. So in 1934, there was a Professor Hull, and he was really interested in rats. And he had this maze that he got these rats to go around. And there was a goal for these rats to get through the maze and get the goal. And the goal was basically food, cheese. And what he found was that the rats, as they got closer to the goal, they ran faster. It was like really interesting. Why do they run faster the closer they get to the goal? And for a long time, that study in animals wasn't really represented in humans until very, very recently. I'll show you now, is actually they've found it to be true in some context. This notion of actually the closer you are to achieving a goal, the more you want that goal. So this is what's called a card stamp experiment that was done by Kevitz, Uminsky, and Zhang about 5 years ago or so. These are two coffee cards, and on the left there are 10 possible stamps to get stamped in your coffee shop. The one on the right has 12. The interesting thing is that the two green dots represent two pre-stamped stamps. So from the user's perspective, they have to do the same amount of work to get to a free coffee, which would be the end goal, if you like. But the fact is, the one on the right is already started. This idea that the progress is already underway, the task has already been started, makes the person feel more likely to want to finish the task. So they found actually many more people wanted to complete the task on the coffee card on the right than on the left. It's a very, very simple but very powerful demonstration of the goal gradient effect. Steam, the online game downloading service, they use the same kind of principles. So here, they have this thing called the summer sale. It's where they have heavy discounts on games. You could, they have this concept of a trading cards as well that you could get in game and also within the community. There was the same principle could happen when you would buy a game on the store. And so what happened actually was this screen is showing you, say, actually you've got a card, basically. It's a progress indicator. So you get this progress indicator getting the next card before you actually buy the thing. So you actually get this feeling of, oh, so I've got like a free thing, but you haven't actually got it yet. So there's a little bit of ownership bias, this thing of like feeling like this thing is yours, but it really isn't yours yet. And you feel like the progress has really started. It really hasn't. It's kind of naughty, but it's powerful. So there are a few things to bear in mind about this particular bias is that the distance to the goal could be very big, it could be very small, but the shorter the distance, naturally, the more motivated we'll be to get there. If we see there being a lot of work to do to get to the goal, we're less likely to actually want to go through the task. There's also something else that happens when you complete the goal, so complete the task and get the goal. There's what's called a post-reward reset phenomenon. What it really means is, once you've got the reward, you're like, well, you know, I don't really care anymore. I've got my reward, so I can go off. And actually, it's quite interesting because it's even if you have a second reward in place, it's still a very powerful resultant effect. You actually, at this point, after people have got what they wanted, got the reward, they're actually most at risk of losing people, which is quite powerful. Von Restorff effect, otherwise known as the contrast effect. So here we can see a product that exists in a series of other products, and actually we're using contrast to make that product more memorable. So essentially the Von Restorff effect says that if you create a contrast effect between different things, like that red product there, it will become the thing that you remember, as opposed to all the other stuff on the screen. Quickly, there is a good example of this here, but essentially you have a list of products of a particular type, they are beer, and there is a product down there that's nuts. And actually, in my screen here, you can't see it, it's slightly darker, so there's actually a visual contrast effect, and also a product type difference as well. So you're getting this kind of, oh, what's this thing, in the middle of all the other things. It's beer, it's a kind of complementary product as well, so there's a few things going on there, but it's quite powerful to do. So this is product placement and Von Restorff together. But be aware, being different is not necessarily better. It's memorable, but it has to be memorable for the right reasons. People want to have a positive affiliation with that memorable item. So also, as well as that, make sure that what you're contrasting, the thing that you're showing out, has incredibly high significance to the user. There's no point highlighting something that isn't relevant. So make sure it's personal as well. So yeah, choice. This is related to the last one to some extent. Choice is a kind of, I have an issue with choice. I think I'm a minimalist by heart. And I don't like too many things. I don't like having to make too many decisions. This bias suggests that we tend to make fewer decisions when there are too many things to choose between. So actually, here is a good example. This is a company that we do some work with, very good company. They're by no means responsible for this design, but there are lots of different choices to make for these lights. And there's nothing to suggest what each one does. And I don't really know what I would do at this point. Like I just wanted to tell them all like that. But I didn't do anything because I don't really know where to start. It's difficult, it's overloading, it's high cognitive load. Ooh, it just makes me run away. There was an experiment called the jam jar experiment done about maybe 10, 15 years ago by these guys called Iyengar and Lepper, and it was all about jam. On the left you have 24 jams. On the right you have 6 jams. So these jams were set up as a test. 2 particular groups of jams on shelves. And so they did a study to see how many people would actually be interested in these jams. In 24 jams, 60% of people here went up to those jams and interacted with them to some extent. But only 40 people of the green jams actually went up and actually did anything, which is kind of like, that's a bit worrying. So it makes you think, maybe choice is good. But actually, what they found is that in terms of sales, you can't really there, sorry about the red, 3%, only 3% of people who went up to those 24 jams actually ended up buying something, which is kind of insane. Whereas, 30% of people who looked at the 6 jams, they actually ended up purchasing something. So actually choice, the less choice we have, to a certain extent, the more likely we are to make a decision. We can't handle too much. So yes, the choice is good up to a point. But after a while, like the 24 jams, it will increase cognitive load and reduce happiness or utility in economic terms. It's highly dependent on product type. So to some extent, jams are easier to choose between than managed funds, for instance. It's kind of, I don't know, it's just there's less risk involved choosing a jam. I'd like to think than a managed fund. I probably invest less time and money into it. On the other hand, jams, the importance is low for a jam, but actually you're more likely to go through that process in your shopping. You're more likely to go to the shops every week, every few days, than you are to go to an investment bank and choose your managed funds. They have a high importance, but the frequency is probably, I don't know, twice a year or a year. So maybe it's okay to have more choice for something that is less frequent. Don't know, it's something to debate. PK rule. So yes, this is interesting. Antony, where are you? There he is. We've been wearing these. I actually don't wear anymore. The fuel band is quite a powerful device. We had an interesting experience that covers this bias very well. So we really judge the experiences that we have, and maybe my talk today, you'll have the same experience. Don't know, maybe not. I shouldn't say anything. But we judge the experiences by what their peaks were, whether they were high peaks or low, or how they ended. Antony wears a fuel band. He wears it to track his behaviour, the amount of effort that he has on a given day, and he's rewarded by getting these points. The points have to reach a certain threshold, and he completes the task for the day. This graph shows his happiness level, and I've actually talked with him about happiness over the period of 160 days, where he was actually using this thing, and he was able to complete his streak for 160 days. Something happened on the 160th day where something went wrong. His happiness fell through the floor, and you can see it just drop and continue to go down. It left him depressed. It left him completely unengaged, and the device actually just ended up running out of battery. Essentially, Antony went out and he got drunk. He'd forgotten to complete his target of 3,000 fuel points, and essentially he lost his streak. What happened when he lost his streak? So the fuel band, throughout the whole 160 days, it was going, yeah, you've won, you've succeeded, you've done a really good thing. Again, you've won, you've got a 3-week streak, you've got a 4-week streak, blah, 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 blah. When he lost, when he failed, which is what happened, it said nothing. It was like, and it started from 0. And it didn't acknowledge the fact that he had this streak. And he couldn't have it. It was emotionally draining. He put so much effort into the thing, and it gave nothing back when he needed it most. It could have said something like, Antony, you had an incredible streak. It could have been more empathic. It could have said things like, it's your longest by far, this streak. 90 days more than any of your friends. And you're now in the top 1% of the UK. This is a point at which he actually did something good. He actually had a streak for 160 days. But they could have turned empathy into positivity and actually praised him at that point. It said nothing. It was really damaging for him, and it damaged his expectation of the product. So, things to think about. End on a high. The fuel band is an extreme example. But when you're creating an experience, trying to think about positive effects of reciprocity. If you do have a great experience, there is a very strong chance of people talking about the experience and reciprocating any goodwill that you share. Understand emotion. Emotional desire is related to psychology. Empathizing with the user mindset is really important. I've got here, it says GTA 5. This month's Develop magazine, the gaming magazine for developers, they talk about how they don't just throw levels together. They don't just I don't know, that will go there, that will go there, and that tree can go there. They really understand and try to understand the psychological profile that each level goes through and understand the peaks and the troughs of the user throughout that journey and how they feel at the end of it. They really understand it. And failure, it's okay. Well, it's not the end. If your service or your experience fails, like the Mike Fuel brand, you can use empathic design principles to try and restore confidence. So the night product design failed, but actually what won Antony back was the customer support. So there are ways of, and on Twitter, it was great. What was your experience with the customer support?
Amazing.
Amazing, there we go. So it won him back, and he's now, you can see it on his wrist, he's wearing it again, and what's your streak?
225 days, but I've got 1,000 more points to get today. I need to drink it again.
Yeah. Drink that. Do you like to get the shot? Great. So yeah, there, even if there is a failure, there is a possible way of getting out. Chunking. This is more of an IA-related principle, I guess. But it's kind of it's not really a bias as much, but it's worth putting in there. So essentially, we can consume. It's easier to consume groups of related information and recall them in the future than it is if they're disparately spread. I'll give an example. A 1966 study looked at by Lilly looked at this. This is actually a phone number, but they haven't chosen to chunk into the corresponding. This is actually a US phone number. The number into its corresponding chunks. It's very difficult to really capture and remember, recall that telephone number. Whereas when they chunked it, it would actually become very, very quickly, a lot more easy to recall and easy to remember basically in the future. It's much clearer to see it and remember it in the future. And you can see that together actually. There's a subtle difference of spacing in this case, but they're grouped bits of information. And I'll talk about the number of bits of each chunk, why it's relevant. But yeah, it made it easier to recall and understand. So this chunking thing isn't evil. It's actually a normal IA practice, good practice to get into. People will thank you for it, albeit slightly subconsciously. They probably won't come up to you in the street. It's fine. In terms of our capacity to hold information, there's debate about it, but it's roughly around 6 chunks, bits of information at any one time. So we have a limited capacity, and that gets less as you get younger, and young adults have like 4, and children have less. And also it depends upon the category of information you have. So if it's digits, like the telephone number, it's roughly around 7, for letters it's 6, and for words 5. Even if it's long words, it's even less. So these things dictate the amount of information you should put together in a chunk. Cool. It sounds like a really strange one, this one, but it's not, it's fine. A hedonic adaptation. And it's all about restriction, really. And this is actually quite a powerful one. So the idea is that if you restrict access to life's pleasures, it will lead to a greater experience in the long term of that particular type of consumption and happiness. I'll give the example. The only reason I have chocolate here is because there's a chocolate a study that's actually done this year, so this is very new research. 2-week study from Harvard, chocolate consumption. There are two groups here. The one on the left and the one on the right. So the one on the left were given as much chocolate as they could possibly want to consume over a 2-week period. And the one on the right were given, look at the control group, so they were given none, basically. And they went away for 2 weeks, and the one on the right binged on unlimited chocolates. It was chaos. They just ate a lot of chocolate, basically. The interesting thing that happened, so they came back the next week, after the 2-week study had ended, and chocolate was given to each member of each group, and the study was to see what would happen. And actually, Group B, who hadn't gorged, hadn't binged on any chocolate, hadn't taken any chocolate, reported a few things really interesting. Higher treat savouring, they savoured it more. They had a higher level of happiness, and after consuming the chocolate, they had a better general mood. very powerful evidence there to show that restriction, to some extent, will improve the experience of that thing, whatever it is. Actually, there's some other studies as well. Here's another study. There's all the references down here. It'll be on Twitter. I'll look at it. Taking breaks or listening to music, or getting a nice massage, they both protract and increase the pleasure that the subjects receive from those things, which is quite nice. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense if you think about it, but it's interesting to see it proven here. This is a slightly controversial one. We actually found that commercial breaks do enrich the experience of a television program, even though we think they're better without them, because you're essentially delaying the experience. In the wild, there are lots of casual games, Candy Crush Saga, that use this kind of thing where they basically delay your ability to continue to experience that game, and it creates a sense of want and need and desire. It's very powerful. It can be very manipulative to some extent, but they've done very well out of it. And it's slightly questionable ethics, I guess, to some extent, but in a way, they're stopping you from playing the game. So is that ethically unsound? I don't know. The considerations really are that too much of a good thing, whatever it is never good. There are these kinds of concepts can keep people, if you choose to apply them, in a permanent state of slight hunger, and they will love you for it. That's the crazy thing, they'll love you, which is kind of mental. But the second one is really interesting as well. What people want isn't always what they want. So it sounds a bit strange, but really, when you ask their opinion on something, like for instance Game of Thrones, if I said to you guys, hey, well, do you want all the episodes now for Game of Thrones? We'd say, sure, yeah. Yeah, I have all 10 episodes now. But then really, the question, given the evidence, given the research that's been done, would that be the case? Would you actually have the same amount of fun if you had everything now? Or if it was spread over a longer period of time, maybe every week or so, would it actually, the utility, the enjoyment, the satisfaction be gained, be higher? Evidence suggests that it would. So, we're irrational, it's okay. Cognitive biases, they're natural, they're part of who we are. And there are loads, I mean there are absolute loads. You go onto Wikipedia, you should really go out and explore them because they're really interesting. But be careful, be natural in how you use them, because we're sensitive creatures, and we are manipulable. We're all essentially to some extent manipulate each other, whether we subconsciously do it or not. Being aware of these biases means that you'll be more able to manipulate others. But, don't be evil, please. There's a really interesting quote by Maya Angelou, who's a poet, and she's an actress. And there's also a civil rights activist. She does all kinds. She says, people will forget what you said, and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. The end. Wait! The end? Catwalk! What are you doing here? This is a surprise, and the end rule, and this is also limited availability. So there's 6 of these. So really, you should try combining cognitive biases for the best.